And here comes the BM-27 Uragan. With incredible accuracy, a HIMARS can destroy this too. Take a look at what happens to Russian MLRS after a strike like this. This is footage of a destroyed Russian Tornado. And here's a destroyed Uragan. Listen to what a Russian soldier has to say about it. And there are many more such examples. According to our data, during the war, Russia has lost 449 multiple rocket launchers, 353 destroyed, 40 damaged, 2 abandoned, and 54 captured. But what if we calculate these losses in monetary terms? The total cost is estimated between $1 billion and $1.4 billion. And that's just the MLRS. So what about HIMARS? Have you heard of their destruction? Throughout the war, the Russians have claimed many such incidents, but there were only 2 that seemed to be true. Here is the first one. The enemy spotted an operating HIMARS and tracked its movement. HIMARS are extremely mobile. It stays in firing position for only 5 minutes, which makes counter-battery fire nearly impossible. Reloading is done in batches and takes roughly 10 minutes. So either the Russians got very lucky, or it wasn't a HIMARS at all. Let us know what you think in the comments. Real or fake? On the road, we see a HIMARS and an escort vehicle. Here's the second incident. A similar situation. A vehicle and what might be an M142 HIMARS are seen on the road. Unlike in the first case, this one is moving into a firing position. An Iskander-M missile is launched and hits the target. The ammunition detonates. The launcher is engulfed in flames. The HIMARS have hundreds of targets hit and only a few casualties, while the Russians have the opposite. So why is that? Well, let's find out. And this footage will help us figure out exactly why an enemy convoy is spotted, but in seconds, it turns into this. Let's watch how it happened. The HIMARS fires. The first hit, the second, and the third. Let's watch that again. In just a few minutes, the enemy convoy's plans were completely destroyed. Here's another recent example. These are 2 Russian Mi-8 helicopters and 2 Ka-52s. Their total value is estimated at $50 million. The HIMARS fires a salvo. We see each aircraft destroyed instantly. Now, here's the interesting part. Let's watch it again in slow motion. At first, it might not be obvious, but for this mission, the AFU used the M30A2 guided rockets. What does that mean? Well, the M30A2 is a GMLRS round for the HIMARS, but instead of a high-explosive warhead, it contains 182,000 tungsten pellets. Think of it like a massive shotgun blast, but with ultra-dense tungsten instead of lead. When the missile explodes above the target, the pellets scatter in all directions, shredding anything below. This typically happens just meters above the ground. Thanks to these warheads, we've seen single strikes hit command posts and multiple targets at once. Take this convoy for example. The M30A2 warhead is incredibly effective against such targets. Here is a perfect demonstration of its effectiveness. The convoy splits. AFU forces track them down and move in. From above, we see successful impacts. Mission accomplished. Here is yet another example. This time, tungsten munitions are used again. The first round likely disables one vehicle. We can see it burning. Then, a massive explosion hits the rear of the column. Notice how the blast happens a few meters before the vehicle, confirming it was an M30A2 airburst. Then, a massive secondary explosion. A fuel or an ammo truck is hit, causing a chain reaction. Now, look at this concentration of vehicles. In this example, I want to show you another feature of the HIMARS. We know that HIMARS are incredibly precise, but do you realize just how accurate they are? A GMLRS missile has a circular error probable, or CEP, of just 5 meters. That means that if you draw a circle with a radius of 5 meters around a target, 50% of the rockets will land inside that circle. And that's exactly what we see here. A series of explosions. One after another, the vehicles are destroyed in flames. The HIMARS effectively eliminates enemy equipment. Now, you might have noticed that 2 of these targets were trying to escape. The HIMARS adjusted its coordinates and fired again. Precision strikes followed. Maneuvering did not save the enemy. A HIMARS uses 6 launch rails. This means that it can hit 6 targets in a volley from completely different locations. Here is what that looks like in action. These are 2 Buck M2 systems. They are 150 meters apart. The HIMARS fires. Boom! Both targets hit almost simultaneously. Here, the distance is smaller, just 50 meters. These are 2 Russian Grads. Kaboom! Absolutely destroyed. And here, the Russians made a big mistake. 3 targets placed side by side. These are also Grads. And it's a hit. The second. Watch what happens next. And here, 2 Nona self-propelled artillery systems. The HIMARS destroys them with just 3 rockets. We see them burning from the screen of a Ukrainian drone. Later, Russian media recorded a report at this site. Let's hear what they have to say.
Когда попадает HIMARS в землю, прорывает глубину, я не знаю, там, но здесь дыра, говорят, мерили, вот эта дыра, она 4-метровая. Так пробивает он землю, HIMARS. А это видно насколько, да?
Now take a look at this scorched clearing in the forest. This is the result of a HIMARS strike. Now I'm going to show you how it happened. Recon found 5 Russian APCs, 2 trucks, and an ammo depot. They tried to hide in the forest, but failed. Here, a HIMARS precision strike. The first hit is right on target. But that's only the beginning. The ammo depot ignites, triggering a chain of powerful secondary explosions. The Russian vehicles are blown apart. Flames devour enemy APCs and trucks. Fire spreads across the entire position. One by one, elements of the Russian faction are turning into flaming wreckage. The accuracy of the HIMARS and the work of the Ukrainian scouts leave no room for further resistance in this sector. Intelligence is crucial when using HIMARS. Check this out. The AFU spots an enemy transport and supply depot. In Ukraine, HIMARS operate on the sensor-to-shooter concept. This means that target data goes straight from recon to command, and then instantly to the launcher. The result? 2 missiles obliterate the enemy transport. Even hiding in shelters doesn't guarantee survival. Recon tracked a vehicle entering a hangar, coordinates are sent, and the HIMARS strikes. The shelter and the vehicles inside are gone. Here, Ukrainian drones methodically identify components of a Russian SAM complex. We see radar stations, self-propelled launchers, and refueling vehicles. A command post is also spotted. A fuel truck arrives at a Buck M2 radar station. This is a critical moment, indicating the vulnerability of the complex and its active use. The intelligence received is immediately put to use, and the HIMARS quickly move to action. Kaboom! Massive explosions visible from altitude. Note the distance between the targets. At least 2 self-propelled launchers and loaders of Buck M2 SAMs were completely destroyed. The radar was also lost. Mission accomplished. But do the Russians have anything to rival the HIMARS? The first thing that comes to mind is the Tornado S, an upgraded Smerch system. It's considered impressive by Russian standards, but here's the problem. The only way the Russians seem to use it is like this. And the conclusion that can be made is that the Tornado S is nothing but destructive. The HIMARS is the opposite. Ukrainians have used it multiple times to strike high-value command centers, shifting the course of combat operations. For example, this building, believed to house numerous Russian officers, was hit. In this case, Ukrainian forces identified the location of Russian infantry who were reinforcing the armor on their vehicles. GMLRS cluster warheads hit the target area with surgical precision. A powerful blast and fire followed, destroying Russian gear, including vehicles reinforced with improvised armor. According to the Ukrainian military, the occupiers tried to strengthen their armor, but instead improved their casualty rate. The HIMARS have redefined the battlefield, especially when it comes to strategic infrastructure. Take bridges, for instance. Here, we see HIMARS surgically targeting bridge structures. Even temporary pontoon crossings are hit. Vehicles on the bridge are stuck as well. And now, from the perspective of the Russians caught in one of those strikes.
After that, we see massive detonation. The fireball shot up above the trees. The blast obliterated the target and scattered debris across the area, setting the surrounding plantation ablaze. Further analysis by experienced drone pilots explained what had happened. The drone hit the engine compartment of the MTLB. In addition, there was a huge amount of explosives on board. That's what caused a detonation of such force. It often takes careful planning to eliminate armored targets with small drones. The enemy is adapting and improving its defenses. But Ukrainian pilots managed to find the key for every lock. This APC had already been damaged, but kept moving. That's why more drones are used to stop the target. From the other drone's camera, we can see this strike taking place. Rightfully so, the vehicle was still active. The FPV struck. Another blast. A second drone engaged. A spectacular impact. One more FPV closed in. The AFU spends a huge amount of resources on a single APC. The final blow triggers a chain of ammunition explosions. Now I'm going to show you something interesting. The Russians are moving in to attack. The amount of weapons they have is terrifying. 3 enemy APCs came under AFU fire. A nearby explosion erupted. Infantry refused to leave the armored vehicles or take assault positions. Instead, they fled. One of the 3 APCs was destroyed during the retreat. Soon after, another enemy APC delivered fresh troops to continue the attack on Ukrainian lines. The delay suggests that the new troops didn't want to fight the Ukrainian defenders either. Therefore, the APC is opening motivational fire. There are no Ukrainian soldiers in the wooded area. That's how commanders get infantry to move forward. Just look at what they're doing. But a little later, the APC will pay for this attitude. Now, they're trying to retreat. But an FPV struck it. The hit target loses speed and soon stops. The second drone strikes the decisive blow. But not far away, the enemy is already moving decisively to attack with 4 APCs. The first of this column paves the way, but it ends up in a swamp under fire from the armed forces. The FPV flies into the immobilized target and hits the turret with a precise strike. The tank is still moving its turret, so more explosives are dropped on it. The second explosive is even more accurate and destroys the tank. The scout films the spectacular explosion. The attack drone flies to the rest of the column. Another target is hit. The FPV catches up with the APC and attacks it from the side. There is a hit. And then, the APC gets stuck. A drone flies into the 4th target. It's not enough, but another powerful explosion later hits the 4th APC. The drone records a series of detonations before the control strike. But before it hits, it captures its explosion. The scout confirms a double hit on the target. One of the previously hit APCs has gotten its comeuppance. From the drone's camera, we see the hit. The strike comes right under the muzzle. Another previously hit APC is on fire. After the convoy is destroyed, the artillery works on the entire breakthrough sector, where the enemy tried to gain a foothold earlier. FPVs fly into the dugouts. They destroy strongholds and firing points. The drone flies right in. The enemy's ammunition and weapons have been destroyed, so they will not be able to gain a foothold here. Now pay attention to this episode. Not far away, Ukrainian pilots set a cunning trap for the enemy. Drones flew to attack. 2 enemy APCs broke through to the forest belt. The Ukrainian armed forces meet the invaders. 2 scouts are following them. These drones record the landing and movement of enemy infantry. The situation is under control. Ukrainian unmanned reconnaissance drones transmit information about the enemy's location and movements to artillery and attack drone pilots. Reconnaissance adjusts the artillery. The Ukrainians take advantage of the fact that the targets are not moving. Drone hits one of the APCs. Ukrainian artillery does not stop firing. The second one is also hit. The scout films the fire. Suddenly, almost simultaneously, the first APC is hit, and an artillery shell explodes in a field nearby, and another explosion nearby. Cluster shells effectively cover the sector. The assault is finally thwarted. The drone continues to destroy one of the APCs. The reconnaissance man spotted a UAV attack on another target. These APCs won't hurt anyone anymore. Not far away, Ukrainian pilots set a cunning trap for the enemy. Drones flew to attack. The hit does not stop the tank. However, the strike had unpredictable consequences. The tank turns around. He tries to go around the APC and hits it with a track. After that, the tank got stuck and the crew abandoned it. The first impact jams the controls. Now the FPV has to finish off the target. An observer spots smoke. Another FPV confirms the fire. The target is eliminated. There's still that target left to burn. The reconnaissance man only later confirmed the fire that was burning the target's insides. The attack continues. A hit to the turret from behind. That's a very good shot. The target is instantly ignited. The column of fire burns the tank to the ground. The FPV hits another target. There is fire behind the tank's turret. A spectacular explosion destroys the target as it reaches the tank's ammunition. A scout spotted a repair and evacuation vehicle under drone attack. Within minutes, several Ukrainian FPVs hit the target from different angles. And here's the result. The enemy's recovery vehicle caught fire and erupted in a powerful explosion. It had previously rescued numerous vehicles the AFU didn't manage to destroy, but not anymore. Despite its strong armor, the drones eliminated it. And this is the episode I left for dessert. Suddenly, in the middle of spring, snow fell. The strange weather slowed down the enemy. This gave the armed forces time to find hidden targets. The scout found camouflaged positions. There is an enemy T-80 tank there, but the AFU will be in for another surprise. The attack drone is flying into battle. It cleared the way for the next one. The second FPV also hits, but only in the shelter itself. The explosion demolishes a tree. A bomber arrived at night. He dropped a powerful explosive right on target. The second strike caused another explosion. The third strike detonated. The bomber continued to work on the target, sparing no ammunition. But the pilots were in luck. Suddenly, they found a shelter for another tank nearby. Another group of UAVs took off. A series of powerful explosions from the munitions not only damages the target, but also clears the frame of trees, allowing it to be identified. This is a new T-90 tank that is being hit by the munitions. A powerful explosion rises from the affected turret. The thermal imager scrutinizes the target. A few more rounds blow it away. This is one of the enemy's most modern and powerful tanks. Its destruction is a priority. The next morning, the bombers arrive here again. The target needs to be finished.
Я тебя спрашиваю, сколько человек? 5, выходишь сюда.
These are Russian prisoners captured during a large-scale, meticulously planned operation. The situation is rapidly deteriorating. Russian forces are infiltrating the city in small groups and occupying high-rise buildings to cover the advance of subsequent waves. The mission of the Ukrainian Special Forces is to recapture several 9-story buildings and block the enemy's further movement. This operation requires speed and perfect coordination. That's why the team first rehearses every move inside a building identical to the one they will be storming, located in the rear and already damaged by bombings. At the same time, they thoroughly study the terrain and the approach route, as a major obstacle lies ahead. One building fully controlled by Russian forces, and another partially occupied by them. In essence, the Ukrainian position is caught in a semi-encirclement. The soldiers begin their advance from the drop-off point. It's extremely risky, but with calm precision, they move past enemy positions. Eventually, they reach the first building, a critical point they must pass through in order to bypass the direct line of fire. Give a like to these soldiers. They carry not only the enormous weight of their gear, but also the responsibility for the future of every Ukrainian. At last, the group reached the building occupied by Russian forces and began the clearing operation.
Беру лестницу. Справа дверь открыты, пацаны. Справа дверь открыты, слева дверь открыты. Пацаны, держу эти двери, один на лестницу. Помощь, лестница.
Floor by floor, they advanced through the 9-story structure. While one team provided cover, the other methodically searched every apartment, every room, every closet, every place where Russians might be hiding. After clearing all the floors, the plan was for the group to breach the wall to the neighboring section of the building using 2 TM-62 mines. This would have allowed them to begin clearing the next stairwell from top to bottom. However, the explosion didn't produce the expected result. The wall remained intact. They had to improvise. Under enemy fire and with great risk, the soldiers sprinted across an open area. It was dangerous, but no one even considered retreat. The mission had to be completed. From that point on, everything went according to plan and without complications. Some Russian soldiers surrendered, realizing that resistance was futile. Soon after, one of the brigades of the armed forces of Ukraine arrived and secured the positions, while the special forces withdrew to the evacuation point, successfully completing the mission. Later, the Russians abandoned the neighboring 9-story building and leveled it to the ground. Thanks to the actions of this unit and a series of other coordinated efforts, Ukrainian forces managed to bring equipment closer to the city and began pushing the Russians back, preventing them from entrenching themselves. Tanks delivered precise strikes on enemy concentrations, forcing them to abandon their positions. Soldiers of the Russian Federation attempted to break into the city across open fields, using civilian ATVs. The result is right in front of you. Let us know in the comments if you also think that racing through a minefield on biker club vehicles isn't exactly the best military strategy. Unfortunately, not everything always goes according to plan. Unexpected situations happen. The group was moving toward the drop-off point when suddenly an explosion rang out. The vehicle had been hit. The Russians had set up an ambush. The driver reports, "The vehicle is on fire, and they must immediately abandon the open area." This is the kind of moment when it's easy to panic. But despite everything, the soldiers act with coordination and composure. Under the enemy's watchful eye, they move steadily toward their positions. A mortar round lands just a few meters away, but they keep moving. In addition to being dangerously close to enemy positions, they're being hunted by Russian drones. There are already the first wounded, yet the soldiers push on. The drones swarm after them, giving no moment of rest. On top of everything, anti-personnel and anti-tank mines are scattered all around. The drone doesn't hit directly, but crashes very close to a soldier, causing shrapnel injuries to his legs. He receives the necessary medical aid, and the group continues moving. To the full range of threats, Russian artillery is added, which begins shelling the area. the group reaches their position. There's no alternative route for approach. The terrain is an open field, and an enemy drone spots the approaching vehicle in advance. The vehicle arrives at the position, and the Special Operations Forces begin the assault. From the very first minutes, the Russians start taking losses. A Browning opens up, and each operator executes their pre-planned and well-rehearsed role. Watch as a Russian drone crashes behind the group, brought down by the electronic warfare system mounted on the vehicle, saving the soldiers' lives in the process. Another drone appears, but this time it detonates. Since the enemy couldn't be caught off guard, and given the Russians' advantage with fortified positions and drone support, the Ukrainian soldiers are forced to retreat, having inflicted significant losses on the Russian forces. At the last moment, another Russian drone with a fragmentation warhead crashes and explodes near the vehicle. All the soldiers stay in place. The doors close, and the group, with 2 wounded but no fatalities, pulls back. An IFV, fully loaded with ammunition, advances toward Russian positions located in a destroyed Ukrainian village. The vehicle is well protected from drone attacks from above and from the sides, but both the front and rear are wide open, shielded only by a few pointless dangling chains that offer no real protection. The moment they heard the Ukrainian drones, they immediately rushed for cover, and, true to form, left their signature open hatch, along with their useless protection. That's exactly where the kamikaze drone flew in with surgical precision. As the fire ignites, the detonation begins, and the first explosion echoes out. Another explosion follows. And that's not the end. The third explosion sounds. In this situation, judging by the powerful detonation that sounded 5 times, the payload was far more valuable and expensive than the vehicle itself. A drone strikes a Russian turtle tank advancing to assault the positions. Another drone hits the rear. Thick smoke and flames engulf the armor, forcing the crew to abandon the clumsy, heavy tank that had helplessly gotten stuck on a slight incline. They flee in a hurry, leaving everything behind, even their own weapons. Panic takes over, and the soldiers scatter chaotically, empty-handed, trying only to save themselves. Inside, there were at least 8 assault troops, more than enough to cause serious trouble for the Ukrainian defense. But instead of a breakthrough, there was a burning armored vehicle, thick smoke, and searing metal. Artillery methodically cut off their escape route, leaving them no chance of making it out alive. This bridge was a critically important artery on the front line. The Russians used it as cover.
A Ukrainian tank rolls in for the assault. The drone is filming in thermal mode. A shell is loaded into the gun. Fire! A direct hit on a residential building. Reload and fire! Another hit. And another. Step by step, the Ukrainian tank suppresses enemy forces inside the multi-story building. This is critical for the next stage of the operation. The tank's mission is now complete. Time to fall back. Meanwhile, under cover from the tank, Ukrainian assault troops move back into the settlement. They're supported by artillery and drones. These scouts on ATVs, taking advantage of the enemy's distraction, begin clearing mines from the main road, all so Ukrainian armor can advance. The enemy tries to interfere, but their efforts are in vain. Now, Ukrainian APCs carrying infantry are moving towards the settlement. They start from the outskirts, gradually advancing and surrounding the enemy. Russian troops attempt to flee, but the scout teams are right behind them. Any building where the enemy might be hiding is cleared the very same way. First a grenade, then entry. After blowing one of them open, the soldiers move in. They check and find the enemy. Another grenade is thrown. And another. It collapses the basement, trapping the enemy inside. The troops keep moving forward. Recon drones spot dozens of soldiers scattered throughout the settlement, and now the Russians begin to realize the trap they've walked into. A scout is informing the group. An enemy spotted up ahead. The troops start to close the distance. Step by step, they clear everything in their path. One of them spots an enemy. All major points of dialogue are displayed as subtitles with voiceover. The second team surrounds the building. Grenades are thrown through the windows. They decide to flank the house from the other side. The enemy is taken out. At the same time, more assault groups arrive. Here comes the second team. They immediately run into enemy forces.
Good, right, well that doesn't work.
A soldier throws a smoke grenade to cover his brothers and regroup. Buildings housing enemy troops are hit with RPG fire.
RPG!
The commander gives the order.
Moving!
The troops advance. This kind of courage deserves your like.
Frag up.
A soldier throws a grenade into a garage. The team moves forward.
Crow your leg. Pushing.
They enter the inner courtyard, where enemy movement was spotted. One soldier opens the door. The second tosses a grenade inside.
Davey, back. Back, grenade! Give him hell, son.
The enemy fires back. The exit is under control.
You ready? Hold on.
The grenade clears the room. Enemies neutralized.
I'm so sorry, boy.
Meanwhile, here's what's happening with the first group. Ukrainian forces are clearing out the remaining abandoned Russian infantry. At this point, it seems Russian command was paralyzed. You can tell by how their troops behave. But the Ukrainian forces kept pressing forward. One Russian group attempts a counterattack. Ukrainian scouts take cover in what used to be a building. While the enemy suppresses them with fire, one soldier looks for a spot to toss a grenade. But suddenly, the buzzing of an FPV drone fills the air. The enemy is hit by Ukrainian drones. The remnants of the Russian group try to hide out in a building. A fatal mistake. Another drone flies inside and collapses the structure. But not all enemies are bold enough to counterattack. In this garage, a Russian unit is pinned down. We see two Ukrainian soldiers holding the entrance, while two others flank from both sides. Their goal? Toss grenades inside, but it's difficult under enemy fire. An FPV drone comes in to assist. Flames tear through the structure. The defeated enemy surrenders and walks out. Working under enemy artillery fire is extremely dangerous. This soldier is wounded by shrapnel during a barrage. He informs his team and pulls back to safety. Ukrainian forces call for evacuation. The evac vehicle rushes to the wounded. The enemy is already aware and prepares a strike. But the vehicle reaches the soldiers in need. It comes under attack by FPV drones. But even after several direct hits, it keeps moving and gets the soldiers out. Evacuations almost always happen under the worst and most dangerous conditions. Their courage deserves your support, and this video deserves to be shared. Air support also takes part in this mission. Ukrainian forces could not dislodge the enemy from these buildings. Then, the jets arrived. 2 air-dropped bombs, and the objective was completed. another enemy strongpoint. Three precise bomb strikes, and the buildings are completely destroyed. Here, Russian troops had dug in, and it became a problem. Air support had to be called in. The bombs hit their targets with precision. The strongpoint is destroyed.
The upper levels collapse dramatically in clouds of smoke and debris. Tons of rubble bury enemy positions, weapons, and ammunition beneath them. Another blast, and the remaining structure crumbles like a house of cards. This group of AFU soldiers decided to repeat the same difficult tactic, but under the cover of darkness. The APC boldly drives straight between the buildings previously held by the enemy. The AFU find themselves in a vulnerable position under potential fire, with unknown enemy numbers and armament. Their only hope is speed and luck. A Ukrainian soldier rigs one of the buildings with explosives, and moments after he returns, the APC opens fire with its machine guns and begins to retreat. Its armor withstands enemy fire, while the machine guns, just in case, clear the path. They manage to leave the enemy-held area without losses. The reconnaissance drone captures the stunning explosion of the rigged building. Nearby, more explosives were planted on the lower floors of another building, where enemy troops were dug in the basement. Upon detonation, the structure is torn apart, and dozens of tons of concrete come crashing down on the enemy's fortifications. However, urban combat is often much more intense. An entire building became a battlefield when one half was seized by the enemy and the other held by the AFU. Gunfire erupted between the units on different floors. But while some AFU soldiers drew enemy fire, a few daring fighters planted explosives on the enemy-held side of the building and returned to their own. A powerful explosion instantly ended the standoff. A Ukrainian tank advances. Enemy infantry is entrenched in this building. The tank opens fire with its main gun. Two reconnaissance drones are observing the destruction of the building, where the enemy had set up positions. The second drone captures the shot at close range. The target is destroyed, and the tanks move on. On another section of the front line, two Leopard tanks emerged from cover and set out on a risky operation. Ukrainian UAVs coordinated their movements. They moved closer together, and then one of them advanced down the road to engage the enemy. The other turned sharply and opened fire on the target from the side. The enemy returned fire, but they were caught off guard. For now, the explosions are far off. For many months now, due to the threat of drones, tanks on both sides have operated almost exclusively from cover. That's why this bold assault took the enemy by surprise, allowing the AFU to destroy key targets. After the difficult operation, the tanks turned back and withdrew. However, among the series of tank attacks, this one was the riskiest. Again, there were two tanks, but this time, they didn't maneuver. They charged head-on. At such close range, the powerful main guns tore apart enemy positions. But the Ukrainian tanks were out in the open, without cover or protection. Had the enemy possessed anti-tank weapons, this daring operation could have ended in tragedy, especially given the number of trees nearby, where enemy troops could easily hide. But luck was on their side. Recon didn't make a mistake when it directed the two tanks into this zone. The enemy couldn't repel the sudden assault. Either they lacked firepower, or the AFU simply acted with overwhelming determination. Of course, this kind of high-risk tactic must not be overused, because its only real advantage is the element of surprise. That's why, after these bold operations, the tanks will have to stay back for a while and resume firing for cover, as before. Still, they cleared this forest strip with remarkable efficiency, destroying every enemy position all the way to the northern edge of the battle line. The enemy holds a major advantage in armored vehicles, and Russian forces make frequent use of it. But when the occupiers tried to copy this tactic, they were immediately pushed back. The AFU had anticipated that the enemy would attempt a head-on tank breakthrough, just like with many other previously copied maneuvers. The enemy began retreating, but not far. Their APCs came under intense artillery fire. When the drone hovered above the blast site, it captured a direct hit on one of the enemy's armored vehicles. The Russians' tanks came under heavy artillery fire, but the final shell burst behind it, damaging it with shrapnel. A farewell kick from the AFU. But the enemy is also advancing. This time, they managed to jam the Ukrainian drone pilots and set a nearby building on fire. Enemy troops closed the perimeter and prepared for a decisive push. But reinforcements were already on the way. Ukrainian soldiers were moving through the forest toward the village, where the drone pilots were waiting for help. Having fought to the end to avoid capture, the pilots held the line even as flames crept closer to their position. There was no alternative exit, and the main one lay directly in the line of enemy fire. They managed to breach all layers of the tank's defense. The final drone delivered a finishing blow, right beneath the gun, to the already burning target. Thank you for watching. Just take a look at this relatively small area. The Russian army fired thousands of shells here, leaving behind a dense network of craters. Having swept through and turned fertile Ukrainian fields into wastelands, the enemy's artillery relentlessly pushed forward. And when cities stood in its path, there was no talk of urban combat. They were simply leveled to the ground. To truly grasp the scale of the destruction, just think of Bakhmut. Its area is nearly the same as that of the American city of Providence, Rhode Island. Imagine this, an entire city wiped off the map, as if it never even existed. But the Ukrainian army did not remain silent in response. When resources are limited, ingenuity comes into play, and it was precisely this ingenuity that sparked a new era on the battlefield. The era of drones. First came reconnaissance. Ordinary cheap quadcopters, along with more expensive drones capable of staying in the air longer and operating at higher altitudes, help detect enemy equipment and coordinate artillery for more precise strikes. One of these drones spotted Russian artillery vehicles shelling a settlement in southern Ukraine. Ukrainian artillery quickly received the coordinates and opened accurate return fire. Shell after shell struck the enemy equipment loaded with ammunition, turning the tree line into a continuous strip of fire. That's likely how the Russian infantry felt as they sat in trenches out in the open field nearby. And this is the work of a Ukrainian bird paired with a HIMARS. The first strike only slightly damaged the vehicle with shrapnel, but the second one proved fatal for the Russian multiple rocket launcher system, which began to detonate, firing off rockets in all directions. The entire system operated seamlessly. Ukrainian drones tracked targets on the battlefield and transmitted coordinates to the artillery. A single target could be destroyed with just a few precision-guided munitions, such as Excalibur shells or HIMARS rockets. However, these assets were limited in number. the backbone of Ukrainian artillery remained Soviet-era guns and ammunition, though they were significantly fewer in number than those of the Russian Federation. Destroying a single tank could require dozens, or even hundreds, of shells, as Soviet artillery was never known for its precision. Watch how the 122mm shells fall chaotically. This video was captured using night vision during one of the attacks recorded by Ukrainian drone operators. It operated on the principle of grid coverage, where shells would be scattered chaotically across an area roughly 4 by 4 kilometers in size. As ammunition stocks dwindled and European partners struggled to produce enough artillery shells, which had also become significantly more expensive due to high demand, a pressing question arose. How can strikes be delivered more accurately and at a lower cost? That's when the eyes on the battlefield turned into a sting and a new player emerged: the kamikaze drone. In the skilled hands of Ukrainian soldiers, this weapon halts entire columns of Russian vehicles swarming across Ukrainian fields like locusts. As the saying goes, like a fish in water. That's how confidently and decisively drone operators move through the fields, as if they were born for it. Leave a like under the video so even more people can see their righteous and courageous work. What you're seeing right now is a true display of skill. The enemy spotted a Ukrainian reconnaissance UAV in the sky and deployed an SA-13 Gopher into the field to try and shoot it down. The first strike by a Ukrainian FPV drone landed in the ground near the vehicle. In response, the Russians launched another missile, but the drone skillfully dodged it. The enemy began to retreat, but didn't make it in time. Another kamikaze drone hit the target dead on, inflicting serious damage to the anti-aircraft system. Every day, hundreds, and sometimes even thousands of drones are used on the battlefield, taking out a wide variety of targets. These include military equipment that costs thousands of times more than the drones themselves, and requires far greater time and resources to produce. But their main objective remains the same: hunting artillery, the very same artillery that turned Ukrainian cities into ghost towns and left the fields so cratered. Even the moon would be jealous. It's not always necessary to destroy the entire ammunition stockpile or waste a dozen drones to take out an artillery system. Ukrainian soldiers approach the task with cold precision and smart tactics. A drone flies up to the gun and delivers a precise strike directly to the barrel. Look at that. With damage like this, it's no longer a weapon, just a pile of scrap metal, incapable of firing. The drone circles around and spots two Russian soldiers helplessly watching. Even though the gun is already out of action, the drone delivers another hit, just to finish it off for good. Sometimes a choice has to be made: what to take out first, the ammunition or the gun itself. A Ukrainian drone watches as Russian troops bring a 152mm howitzer into position. They manage to detach it and begin preparing to unload the ammunition, an entire truck packed with shells. But suddenly, they spot the drone and open fire. Sometimes they do manage to shoot a UAV down, but not this time. After retreating to a safe distance, all they can do is watch as their entire stockpile for the howitzer goes up in flames. Yes, a drone has no armor and can be taken down in various ways, as you can see right now. But it's fast, highly maneuverable, and, most importantly, packed with explosives. So it's unlikely that anyone in their right mind would want to face it alone. The crew of this self-propelled howitzer came to the same conclusion. They carefully camouflaged the vehicle, leaving only the barrel visible. But the moment they heard the hum of a drone, they abandoned the equipment and scattered to safer spots. In the end, all their efforts to hide it were in vain. they only added more fuel to the fire. The drone flies towards the 9K-51 MLRS. The target is clearly visible as it's firing. It gets closer. The doors are open because the crew hastily fled, seeking shelter in a nearby building, and strikes the engine of the vehicle. Another drone hits the cabin. A third targets the launcher, completely disabling it and, one could say, destroying the vehicle. Unfortunately, without an impressive detonation, as it had already fired its shells. The last drone simply circles around, assessing the damage. A large Ukrainian drone takes to the sky to guide smaller, but extremely painful for Russian equipment, FPV kamikaze drones. One of these drones delivers the first strike. The vehicle bursts into flames. Suddenly, a very desperate Russian soldier rushes toward the burning machine, packed to the brim with ammunition, with a fire extinguisher, trying to put out the blaze. He fails and joins the others nearby, simply waiting for a miracle. The Ukrainians shatter their hopes, launching another drone that targets the launcher. And by the way, take a close look. It's clearly visible that the vehicle is packed with rockets. One of them catches fire and detonates, or more precisely, launches on its own. Eventually, all that remains of the 9K-51 is a scorched black mark on the ground. These Russian artillerymen chose to fire from a very exposed location. As they began retreating to their position, a drone, faster than they were, caught up and gave them no chance. After the strike, the vehicle caught fire and the crew fled. Then, another drone delivered a precise hit on the now stationary target, triggering a truly spectacular detonation. Artillery, once the all-powerful god of war, now hides from small but deadly accurate birds. Drones have already changed the rules of the game. Fast, maneuverable, almost invisible. There aren't enough of them yet, but it's only a matter of time. The near future belongs to them, in the sky, on land, and even at sea. And those who fail to adapt will simply be left behind in the past.
This is a Smerch MLRS, and HIMARS are excellent for destroying systems just like this. Just like the BM-21 Grad, which was found hidden in these trees. And here comes the BM-27 Uragan. With incredible accuracy, a HIMARS can destroy this too. Take a look at what happens to Russian MLRS after a strike like this. This is footage of a destroyed Russian Tornado. And here's a destroyed Uragan. Listen to what a Russian soldier has to say about it.
Все 200, никто не я дыра тут ебать на охуеть. Тут ебать.
And there are many more such examples. According to our data, during the war, Russia has lost 449 multiple rocket launchers, 353 destroyed, 40 damaged, 2 abandoned, and 54 captured. But what if we calculate these losses in monetary terms? The total cost is estimated between $1 billion and $1.4 billion. And that's just the MLRS. So what about HIMARS? Have you heard of their destruction? Throughout the war, the Russians have claimed many such incidents, but there were only 2 that seemed to be true. Here is the first one. The enemy spotted an operating HIMARS and tracked its movement. HIMARS are extremely mobile. It stays in firing position for only 5 minutes, which makes counter-battery fire nearly impossible. Reloading is done in batches and takes roughly 10 minutes. So either the Russians got very lucky, or it wasn't a HIMARS at all. Let us know what you think in the comments. Real or fake? On the road, we see a HIMARS and an escort vehicle. Next, drone footage shows the strike. There's the hit. Drones fly in to finish it off. The image quality and smoke make it hard to tell if it really was a HIMARS. The launcher burns on the road. Here's the second incident. A similar situation. A vehicle and what might be an M142 HIMARS are seen on the road.